Morning, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Coffee Conversations. I'm Parker Williams. I'm the Director of Programs at IABA, here with my colleague Nana Coleman, who is the chair of our Impact Committee. Coffee Conversations is just a kind of monthly program that we've created to have actuaries come and listen to people talk about all aspects of the businesses that they're involved in. And we have a great guest today for you all to hear from. This is Adrienne Johnson, who is a vice president at Guy Carpenter, who began her reinsurance career in Philadelphia in 2005 and steadily advanced from administrative support to technical assistant roles before moving into her current role in life accident and health P&C treaty reinsurance placement and strategy. She specializes in creating coordinated risk transfer solutions for accident-related products, students K through 12, intercollegiate sports, college medical and health, and employer stop loss, while also developing regional and global reinsurance programs that prioritize efficiency, collaboration, and market-aligned outcomes. Known for her analytical approach and hands-on execution of marketing and placement strategies, Adrienne pairs deep product knowledge across lines, including surety, medical malpractice, and workers' comp, with a commitment to client-focused solutions. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Nana and Adrienne and get our conversation this morning started. Thank you all.
Thanks, Parker.
Thanks so much, Parker. And Adrian, thanks again for being on today. As Parker read your bio, I was thinking like, man, if I would have known Adrian like 2, 3 years ago, some of the product problems that I was trying to solve for, in my startup situation, they might have been, I might have had a bit of a smoother road. I might have had someone to call and be like, hey, how do I handle this? Particularly around the health and accident stuff. So today should be a fun conversation. I think maybe let's start with kind of like setting the landscape around what you do, what it is. So I think most of the folks in the call are probably familiar with reinsurance, but probably not familiar with what reinsurance broking is, maybe what reinsurance treaties are, entirely their function in the insurance ecosystem. So maybe if you can kind of help us understand what that is,
Yeah,
and then what your role specifically is and what you're responsible for, that'll be a good start to the conversation.
sure. So good morning, everyone. I hope you guys have your cups of coffee because I do. I'll probably need a refill after this, after the week I've had, but thank goodness we are heading right in to a holiday weekend. So good things on the horizon. So as Parker and Nana have already kind of gone through, kind of where I sit in the whole insurance ecosystem at the reinsurance level. Um, Broking in the reinsurance space, we are hired to provide services to insurance companies that are managing portfolio-wide risks, right? So it's a whole lot of them. And they're trying to provide some sort of protection for themselves on top of that. We help insurers understand what type of risk transfer would work for them, and then we help design it. We help go into the reinsurance market to reinsurers to place it, and to place it with secure partners that will help, keep this insurer financially stable in the event of volatility in their claims. Um, as a broker, we that's essentially our role is, we're help designing it and placing it, but it also turns into an advisory role. Because I support multiple clients across the accident and health space, I now have insights on some of the landscape of what's going on with one carrier versus another. So it quickly turns into placing business, but also providing that insight and behind, it kind of outside of the placement renewal cycle, providing insights on these different things. So broker is a really broad name, and you end up doing a whole lot of different things. Sometimes I put on my actuary cap, because I'm the, one in the room that's supposed to be explaining how we've actuarially kind of backed up our views and some of the things we design. Um, and, we are appointed as advisors more so than, just someone to place the business.
So a couple of things that are interesting to me there. Um, you talked about working with multiple clients. My experience with reinsurance is more on, I mean, we would model, I worked in modeling for about 8 years. So a lot of my work was really more around understanding, like, how does reinsurance look on this particular block of business? Do we need to go revisit, the treaty? Do we need to sort of restructure some of the reinsurance arrangements? Um, do all carriers work with brokers? Do some carriers choose to go it alone? Do some prefer to work with brokers? Like, what is usually the impetus for a carrier to get a broker involved? Then I'll come back to another question I have specifically about the accident and health space. But for now, like, what kind of gets a company engaged with a broker?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's certain reasons, there's different reasons why you would need a broker, would want a broker in place. Um, for the things that I just spoke about, if you don't have those sort of resources internally, someone to evaluate those types of things, you can come to essentially a third party that will help you manage all of that. Another reason why you would come to a reinsurance broker is, to get global access to different types of reinsurers that are writing this type of business to make sure that you're getting the most competitive pricing terms. Um, as a broker, there is a brokerage fee that is charged, but we bring a lot of value with that. Some people can't really make that make sense, the math in their head, the expense of a broker. So they will go direct. There are direct reinsurers out there that it's just a business to business sort of arrangement. Um, and you'll see people having their preferences on, one or the other based on their experience in the past.
That's fair. That's helpful because I guess in my observation or experience, I when I was working as a life actuary, there was always, we're meeting with reinsurers today, or Swiss Re's in town, or Munich Re's in town, or whoever. And so my experience was just always watching an organization go direct or have those direct relationships, and we'd be working with six, seven, eight, nine reinsurers at a time. So it's helpful to kind of understand the role that brokers play, particularly on the accident and health side, because accidents are relatively lower premium product, lower utilization on the product. Like, what role does reinsurance play in that space? Because at least in my, I wouldn't say experience, but my limited engagement in the accident space, from my most recent startup days, it seems like a relatively high margin product. Now you have some companies that, like, accident is largely what they do, but others where it's a smaller part of their business. So
Mhm.
what role does reinsurance play, particularly in that product landscape?
Yeah. There's I think there's about four different ways that, why you would even buy reinsurance, protecting your balance sheet, um, maybe getting some room in your surplus, helping with volatility, and then just some capital plays, maybe just kind of moving around with how you want to deploy your capital. So there are different reasons why, on the accident side, carriers buy. Because, like, just for the reasons you said, it's lower premiums, higher margins. Um, is higher margins. There's a pretty big expense load on the accident side because of the ecosystem for accident, depending on who's distributing it, if it's from your employer, if it's from you're buying a travel policy and they have some service that you can buy insurance behind that, that's like an actual service that people uh, will pay for. Then you have on the flip side someone actually collecting claims, adjudicating the claims, paying the claims. So there's a lot of fingers in the pie on the accident side. So using reinsurance and using a reinsurance broker, might seem a little odd. But what happens on the accident side, if you have someone that has a pretty large book, that's a big ecosystem in itself. So someone like a global and carrier like Chubb or Zurich, they are operating in so many jurisdictions. And if you kind of open the lid and just think about that in one, the health system in the US is different from the health system in LATAM, right? So you kind of have to be able to write this one product. And yes, you're writing some sort of accident or travel, but there's so many different underlying business nuances that make it very difficult to manage. So the reinsurance, you would sort of like, you have to manage that underlying business, let someone else sort of handle the reinsurance. And if there is any claims that are volatile, you're kind of passing that off to them to get paid by your panel, your reinsurance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. Okay, enough of the product questions. I could go on down that road for like this whole time. I want to get to your journey because you mentioned that your career really started in like administrative support, and when we prepped for this call, you talked about having to kind of learn the business, and a lot of it was about being curious, having those conversations. Talk to us a little bit about your journey to where you are now, um, and figuring out how to learn the business and descend through the business. Um, as a as where an alternative could have been like, hey, I'm just going to show up to work and do my job. Like, what was the motivation for you to learn the business, ascend through the business, ascend to leadership, that type of thing?
Hmm. It was quite a journey of me kind of ignoring the opportunity for the first few years of my job. So when I came into Guy Carpenter in 2005. I was coming from the food and hospitality industry. I worked for catering, and I had gotten an opportunity to work at Guy Carpenter. I took it because it was something completely different than what I was doing, and I felt like a very, 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 very small fish in a very big pond. So it took me a little bit to get my bearings straight of like, what was going on, what industry I had even fallen into, and what everyone's role was. Um, I've been a Guy Carpenter for everyone on the call. I've been a Guy Carpenter for 20 years now. So when I started, it was a lot, like I probably wasn't, I was more so just trying to get my own particular role down um, before thinking about everything else. But I was always trying to learn and ask questions of people that I had befriended or people that, would provide that type of information to me. So it took me at least 9 years to decide that I wanted to switch to the business side. So it was a long time of me getting my bearings straight of, food and hospitality to insurance. So it was a long time. Um, but then when I decided that it was what I wanted, it was just almost like a light bulb went on, like, I don't know why I'm not taking this opportunity in this space that I'm sitting in with these people. I can find my way here. I can find value. Um, so I really just used everyone that was around me. Um, all of my friends, I'd worked there for 10 years, so I knew enough people and different units. Um, and I'll tell anyone, I love and need actuaries. Like anytime I find out someone is an actuary, you'll see me light up because I just find that the the knowledge that you guys have and the rigorous sort of training that you guys go to or go through is so extremely valuable. And any other role that's in this business, it's not like an actuarial path. It's just very different. Um, and the knowledge that you have is just so valuable. And especially for someone like me coming in and learning from the ground up. Um, so I talked to lawyers that were in the office, actuaries, catastrophe modelers, pretty much anyone that wouldn't tell me to leave them alone. I was trying to get their information and their view, honestly. And it takes a lot of empathy, but really it was kind of selfish because I didn't have the knowledge that I was just asking all these questions. But it was more like I was coming from this like, well, how do you fit in here? Like, what is your biggest challenge? What I would just ask these types of questions to help me understand, how where I was, but then how I impacted everything else. And that's really what's gotten me into the role that I am now. Um, and I just, head down 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., just working it out, cranking it out. And anybody that anybody that came to me with a question, if I did not know the answer, I didn't use that as an opportunity to say, sorry, I don't know that question. I don't know the answer. I'd be like, give me an hour, give me two, and I'll come back with an answer. So I didn't take any opportunity of something that I didn't know. Um, I took it every time to better understand and better grasp how I could be of value.
Yeah, I mean that's really resonant for me because I can, the idea of just being curious about the organization you're in and how do different pieces fit in, like that's you know once I kind of had some bumps in the road in my actuarial journey. And so, once it was kind of like, all right, this road's not going to go how I thought it was, I felt like that opened up a curiosity for me because I didn't feel so tied to like, oh, my actuarial path has to look this one way. And so,
Mm,
okay, like, what do the underwriters do when I'm seeing this thing in the model? Like, oh, maybe like the chief underwriter has thoughts on like why we're doing this particular thing because it looks funny to me in my model. Or okay, like what's marketing thinking about this particular, strategy that they're rolling out to the sales team? Because we're seeing a lot of this particular type of business come in, and it's looking a little bit funny to me. Um, and so, and honestly, I also just get bored doing like a single thing, and so mainly that was probably also the reason for some of my curiosity, but like that's really resonant, and I think that's part of what we're trying to do even with like this coffee conversations program is like, okay, how can you be curious about like what's going on in the business around you, what different people do, how you can bring value. So it sounds like you kind of took that approach to build up or build to where you're at now. Talk to us about like what specifically you're responsible for
mhm.
and what it means for you to kind of win in your role, and then maybe tell us something about that, like that you're particularly proud of in terms of whether it's an initiative you've driven or something you've been able to accomplish in the business that you're in.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's what I do is I want to be of value to anyone around me. That includes clients, my team members, and even external partners with reinsurers. So I take a really rooted approach in my broking style. People have very different broking styles. Coming up in the business on the P&C side, it is very much one way, very formal, very data driven, um, and very, I would say, routine. Um, on the accident and health side, I call it the Wild West because the property and casualty side is where I started. So I came into that structure and everyone having a role. And with property casualty, there are more dollars with that line of business. So you'll just see a lot more people sort of in that space. Accident and health is so much smaller, from the underlying, from dollar one insurance being charged, it is a smaller environment that we work in. So I just really want to um, be of value, and that's really a win for me. It could be defined as winning new business for the company. Being able to negotiate an amazing deal that, was a little difficult, but you kind of get it done at the end of the day, and it's, the best coverage that your client kind of wanted. And then sometimes it's just finalizing a placement. With our renewals or even our business, we have a placement, we have a deadline to get it all in place. And then once it's finalized, then we kind of set it down for a tiny bit, but then pick it back up to renew it. So it's like a lot of work on a secular sort of structure. So sometimes it's just getting that done. Um, and for me, um, I always want to know that whether I win or lose in all of that, right? If I don't win a new piece of business, or something's not quite going right, then I know that I did the best that I can. And when I lay my head down, it's like, yes, I gave my effort towards the goal of, X. Um, and then if I can be of value to the clients by being proactive, and my knowledge of how things get done, and all of those, if I can help them by providing them something before they need to ask for it, that's a huge win for me. Because then I'm plugging myself into their environment, and then they see that value. It's like, oh, I can just, I can call Adrienne about this employer stop loss thing because, she gets it. She understands like what I'm looking at it, and the environment that we're kind of working in. So that's how I try to create value. I could probably give you a little bit more of a structured answer of, the things that we do, the analytics and the reports and all of those things. But for me, um, and I've been using this a lot lately, I like to zoom out a lot when it comes to challenges, as well as successes, because it just keeps it nice and stabilized. Because you can kind of get, in a good way and a bad way, you can get so dug into the details and it's just so overwhelming. And to keep myself stable, I zoom out. It's like, all right, this is my challenge, but this is where we're working on, right? Like this is the actual ecosystem we're in, not this one thing. We'll get past it. And the same for successes. Um, there's a statement on my desk. I can't remember what I have it written down. But it says success and failure are both temporary. Celebrate the wins, right? But you got to keep moving on. You got to keep it moving, and you want to celebrate a little bit harder when it's a big win. Get it? But for me, I do try to balance out that win and lose and still feel okay at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. So when you talked about being able to zoom out and treat success and failure the same, and the idea that both success and failure are both temporary, it reminds me of a line of one of my favorite poems. It says, "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat them just the same." Um, I think that's particularly interesting when I think about an actuarial journey, because in the exam process, like, which is what sort of dictates the first 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 years of your career, like everything is about passing those exams. And so when you're having a tough time on exams, the lows are low. When you're doing well, the highs are high. And so you sort of get on this, it's easy to get on this roller coaster. But when you get into having to sort of make business decisions, um, you do kind of have to zoom out. And I've seen, I struggled with it earlier in my career to kind of zoom out and say, okay, what are we trying to do as a business? As opposed to like, what is this particular modeling snag that's messing me up on a random Tuesday? And being able to have that sense of perspective is really critical. When you're shifting from a space where your goal is to get the right answer at the back of the book versus now you're responsible for making a decision that you is reasonable and that you have to be able to defend and that you have to be able to live with. And sort of being able to keep that even keel is really, really, really important. So I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think that's a really, really important point. Um, and that has real applicability to our journeys as actuaries and how we sort of make that transition. Um, Maybe this is maybe a little bit more of like a tactical question, but when you're going out to either try to win business for the company, so win sort of a new brokerage client, when you're doing work to try to get your client a certain type of reinsurance deal, are you working with like a team of folks? Like, what does your sort of collaboration with folks look like? Is there some amount of work that you're delegating? Like, what's that kind of process look like?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I mean, we're a very team structured sort of business in broking. You have the brokers that are responsible for building the relationship. You have your actuarial team there to help with the data and sort of the analysis that we do. Um, we'll do we have a catastrophe modeling unit that supports the different business units and lines of businesses. Um, we have an accounting team. We have a contracts team that, deals with the actual language around each of the deals. So when you're going out to get new business, you have all of these sort of tools in your tool belt to bring out when you're going to sit down with someone new. And I would say that the most critical skill that you have to have in that space of selling is you have to be so sharp with communication. You're meeting so many different people that have different perspectives, different experiences. But to get new business, for someone to appoint us as a broker, I need them to get me to trust me first. So that can just take so many different forms, depending on, what they value. Unfortunately, I was not a golfer as a child. That's not a hobby that fit into my sort of upbringing. So golfing is not something that I do, but that's a place where a lot of people build trust in that sort of environment. The one thing I had in my arsenal is coming from the food and hospitality. I can find the best meal in any city, and that's what I use to get people a nice meal. It goes a long way. But really, it's just, really understanding the client, the environment that they're in, what challenges they might be facing, and being able to communicate my understanding of those things. Maybe they don't have a challenge in those ways, but just knowing when I sit down and someone tells me, oh, I write travel insurance business, I can ask questions about, oh, well, how are you distributing that? Who do you have as a TPA that's managing your claims? There's different things to like start it really for me to learn who they are and what their challenges could be. But it's just that communication of being able to read someone, verbal and nonverbal. You know, if they're understanding you, if you're understanding them, and to be able to say, "Oh, I understand your needs, and this is how I feel like we can help you create a solution around that."
I really love the way that you're talking about like selling business, winning business, and this sort of focus on understanding your customer. Um, I've been on founding teams in a couple of startups, and have done some work to advise small business owners, startup founders. And one of the things that I try to preach as much as I can is like understand your customer, right? Like you're not going to be able to sell them anything if you don't have an understanding of what they're actually struggling with, what they're trying to optimize for, what opportunities they're trying to take advantage of. Um, and so there's a real importance of taking the time to actually listen, taking the time to observe. Sometimes you don't even have to like ask questions. Sometimes you can just sort of observe how they're dealing with a certain situation. And so that's absolutely critical. And I think something that is probably undervalued in a lot of the spaces that we're in. I think translating that to even being an actuary, like, it's very simple. We learn about it at least when I was taking exams and going through that process in some of the modules by the actuarial control cycle. But the first stage is identifying the problem. And you kind of have to do some observation and some listening to understand and then identify that problem. And I think sometimes that's really, really undervalued. We get so focused on, what's this technique that I'm going to apply, or what's this thing that I want to do, or sometimes just like I feel like I need to kind of show my brilliance, that we don't take the time to really understand. And so this is like really the entrepreneur in me and the product guy in me is like loving this, because that's like step one in product development is like, okay, I have an idea. Does it actually align with problems that people have, or am I solving a problem that doesn't exist?
Mhm.
So absolutely, absolutely love that. Um, in terms of challenges, so also I should add the my association with reinsurers is and reinsurance is really food. Like when I was in traditional practice, people were always like, "Yeah, we're going to dinner with Swiss or Munich or RGA or whatever. And it was always at like the nicest restaurants in town. And I was like, man, I gotta figure out how to like start working on reinsurance because I am not going to those places. So now I know that seems to be a thing in y'all's game. Um, but in terms of like challenges and in some of the biggest challenges that you have in working with clients in winning business, talk to us about what that looks like. What are the most challenging parts of what you do?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's many of them. But I would roll them up to, there is a complexity with insurance risk. Um, and sometimes the data to support it or to understand it isn't there, isn't captured, right? We all are, I'm sure, amongst these organizations, it's like, oh, we have a new system on how we capture this. So, everyone put it in and, free form boxes or selection boxes. And, hopefully those inputting that data are doing it accurately so that we can use that. But I think that there is a complexity in insurance risk that you kind of get your arms around from a starting off point, but it shifts and changes so much. And knowing how, you know, like accident insurance, we're subject to claims being paid by hospital billing systems, which is the most painful thing in the world to get the data, to ask questions about it. And it really can really throw a wrench in things. And the hospital billing systems and just claims on the health side in general. The amount of people that touch a claim that gets processed, I don't know that anybody really knows. And whoever is collecting the data is probably someone different than who is actually given the service. Like it just passes hands to hands all the way down. And in the health side, there's such a thing as you can reprice a claim, meaning the claim will actually come through, but somehow, some way they'll be able to get some sort of discount on a particular service. So it'll bring the total claim down. There's actually an entire vendor community that is their own job is cost containment of health claims. So it's very complex. And really, I think what people underestimate is asking questions about those particular things, because they really can dictate how risk changes. So moving from the property casualty side to the accident health side, property and casualty is distributed pretty basically through an agent. There's really no other way that it gets distributed.
Mhm.
Understanding that on the P&C side, when I moved to accident and health, I'm trying to build my understanding of this environment. And it's like, oh, there is not one way that health insurance is distributed, because you can get something from your employer, you can buy it yourself, you can buy it through an association that you're part of, you can buy it when you're booking a trip. It is, and then life insurance is, something that's actually completely different, that sort of sits over it or to the side or fits in. It's this very complex mud map of where health insurance kind of comes through. So my challenge always is like just understanding the underlying nuances of the business that you're on, to be able to understand what the future might look like, right? If something does change, when we went from when Obamacare came out, that was huge for the health market. Like just it impacted so many different people in so many different ways that the landscape after Obamacare, it's still kind of all over the place. So there is some complexities, but if you just somehow find a way to like get your bearings straight and then just keep your head up to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, who it impacts. And you'll be able to be that much more valuable as a leader. And if you don't, then you're going to be challenged by not sort of understanding those things, maybe in your career trajectory. But I think people underestimate just really trying to find a way to connect with what you're doing and how it impacts others. I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't tell you that I'm a passionate insurance person, right? I fell into this job, but I do find value in what insurance was built to do and support the societies that we live in and amongst. And that's what really keeps me here is being able to look at it that way. Otherwise, I
Wow.
would just be like reinsurance broking. Ugh.
Yeah. No, that's and I think sometimes that sense of again, that sense of perspective, like you brought that up kind of over and over again, but that sense of perspective of like what are we really doing, can be really important in kind of grounding us in a way. Um, to that point, what are some things that specifically you do to kind of like this is my second to last question. But what are some things that you kind of do to keep your head up and paying attention to how the industry is shifting?
Um, yeah. I mean, I love talking to people. So that's the first place I go to is I like to meet new people all the time.
Mhm.
And just better understand, what is impacting someone in a different sector. Like being able to speak with you actuaries this morning, like actuaries are, I just find them to be the backbone of any industry that I've actually touched or seen or I'm aware of. Without you guys, we would crumble. Like it just, we would be doing a whole lot of guessing work and it probably wouldn't pan out for most of us. But it's just understanding really how someone else's challenge is similar to mine or maybe different, and using that to keep my understanding of how the world is changing and what is going on. I'm always curious. I don't think that I know everything, like some people might put on. And I know a lot, but I'm always open to being told something different or told that, I'm wrong, because otherwise I won't keep growing. Um, and I find that we tend to run away from challenges because they're hard, and they can be. I've had a tough week. I won't go into it, but it's about getting to the other side of it, and feeling like it was hard, but I got through it. It's done, and now you can
Right,
move on.
right,
And people don't tend to. I like to think as challenges as opportunities always. My first line of defense, even if I'm emotional about it. Um, it's like, no, this is an opportunity. Stop being hard-headed. Figure out what your lesson is here.
right, right. No, I absolutely love that perspective. Um, Okay, and then finally, you mentioned your respect for actuaries, um, but maybe I'll kind of flip that a little bit. Like, what is something that you think actuaries can do generally? So your sort of general observation. What's something that you think actuaries can do better to be more valuable? Now you're in kind of a business development, client relationship management type of role. To folks in your types of roles
Mm,
to be better collaborators, better partners, better advisors, better consultants, whatever you want to call the relationship.
yeah. Um, I've dealt with a number of actuaries, and the ones that I would say that, I would look to work with them again at any point in time is, it really it becomes this conversation of how we understand the problem and asking about what the problem is. When I am challenged and I have to pull the actuaries into a room and we have to look at things. It's like, here is the goal. Here's the expectation of the client. Here is the expectation of this project. How do we get this done, right? And it becomes this information sharing. And I find the ones that are more open to do that are the ones that are always sort of thinking about the things that they know and how it might support it. It's not about the things that they know and, wanting to lead with that credential first. It's like, how do I take what I know and apply it to the challenge? And it's asking about the challenge. Like what do you need? What is this report? What is this actuarial analysis trying to glean? Right. And there just might be ways that you can just do things a little bit smarter um, as a team. And actuaries need to understand that people will hear the word actuary and they might react. But you do bring something to the table that they actually don't have. And that might be just them knowing that. And that's how they're reacting. Like, this guy's smarter than me. I can't, I don't want them to see that. So I'm gonna put on a little bit of a front. But to me, it's the actuaries that have that trait of being able um to just discuss versus, you know, putting out a report and telling you how the math works and then walking away from it. It's really helped my understanding of it, right? And as broker, I'm supposed to be able to explain these things. I don't always have an actuary in the room. I have to be able to communicate it with others. But when the actuaries are there, I'm just like, oh, thank goodness, because they just can bring this knowledge that is the backbone of what we do, and I see the value in it.
We appreciate that. That reminded me of a friend of mine telling me about how a direct report, who's also a good friend that I worked with for a while, he'd been tasked with like talking with auditors and he wanted to explain like why the math was what it was. And she was like, no, no, no. Like, you just need to tell them that this calculation is done in C7 in this particular file or in this particular, sheet. So definitely, I think that that message is really coming through in terms of like being curious about the problem, being willing to discuss, not necessarily leading with like, this is my knowledge and this is my experience and this is my credential, but sort of understanding what's being asked and then sort of saying, hey, how does what I may know or what I may have seen in the past kind of apply? So, Adrienne, this has been really amazing to have this discussion here. I do want to open it up for our folks who are on the call with us to ask any questions that they may have. Because I think there's just been a ton that you've kind of dropped in that I think is really useful to all of us on the call. So if there's any questions, feel free to either come off mute and ask, throw a hand up, throw them in the chat, and we will get to those questions as we see them. I'm going to see if I see anything so far.
You can ask any question. I promise I will be very real.
Hey,
This
Adrian, I have a question for you. What prompted that shift from the food and beverage industry into the insurance? And like, that's one significant life shift. Can you talk about that change?
I can. I would say that it was mostly just it was really a life perspective light bulb that went on. When I came out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And there were a lot of people going into college and, picking something generic or someone that was picking something very specific. And, for me and what I felt like I wanted to put into the world, I was just like, I don't know how I can be of value. Um, it could have everything to do with the fact that I am one of 11 children and I'm in the middle. So I wasn't the oldest, I wasn't the youngest, I wasn't the bratty one. I was just the one in the middle, seeing everything kind of happening. So I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. And the opportunity for the food industry happened. I was like, I like food. Sure. I'll go into like the service industry. And it was quite fun for a while. But it was exhausting and I just really felt like I wasn't really going anywhere. Um, and then a friend of mine worked for Guy Carpenter and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity here. Um, I'm pretty sure I can get you an interview. Do you wanna apply?" And I was like, "No idea what reinsurance is, but sure." I feel like I needed something different. I needed a change, and I just somehow plopped into this corner of reinsurance, and here I am 20 years later.
Right. Right. Any other questions from folks? I mean, I can go ahead and pop back in. I told y'all I've got product questions, so but I'm sure y'all don't want to hear me ask those. Or maybe I will pop back in with another question here. Um, is there like another part of the insurance industry or the reinsurance space that you would be curious to sort of see or work in, and what's like compelling to you about those potential spaces?
Mm, there are a lot.
There are a lot.
I do have an interest in just things going on in the world and um, the shift. So for the people on the call, I am a millennial technically, but I was born in the early 80s, so kind of a Gen Xer. So, the work hard, head down sort of mentality is my thing. So anything that kind of gets me thinking about just, the world and how time has moved on or not moved on. I'm so interested in cyber and AI, mainly because it's being pushed so hard. And it's like, when I see it or hear it, it's like, so what like how is this really going to impact us on the zoom out, right? Like I can understand the different nuances and things that we can use AI for, and the different projects and things, but like from a long-term view, how does this impact us as people? And I've always thought about this. So cell phones, right? When they first came out,
First came out.
we were like, what do we use it for? Right? We had pay phones. You like like what were we gonna do with it? And we just found use cases, and now it's like there's so much built up around that. I mean, think about it, like cell phones in general and email, right? It was faxing before, and now it turned into, the way we communicate everything. So AI is going to have that same sort of trajectory, but what is it actually going to look like? Are we talking about iRobot with Will Smith? Is that our future, or is it going to be something a little different? I don't know. So that is definitely an interesting space that I think is going to impact most of the insurance industry. But how and by how much is what's left to be seen. That space exploration, I think that's very cool. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm a Star Wars nerd, so I'm like, I don't know, like, am I going to be on a spaceship someday? Because I never thought that when I was a kid. But just how that kind of correlates with, I was brought up on that stuff, and it was all, fantasy. And look where we are now. It's crazy. So what does that mean for us as a society? So there's so much that I try to just connect with, um, just based on my general interest.
Yeah, you when you talked about some of these sort of emerging things, real quick, it reminds me of an actuary that I follow on LinkedIn who recently wrote an essay around like the emerging spaces that actuaries can be involved in and helping to understand new types of risks, based on where either technology is going or sort of issues of global interest. And so I think it's kind of important for all of us to keep our heads up on that. A question from Justin. How's it different working in reinsurance versus direct insurance? Do you work with or interact with actuaries, both in reinsurers and actuaries that are at direct insurers? And what are the differences that maybe you've seen or observed or experienced?
So I definitely have more experience with reinsurance actuaries, but I definitely have interacted with direct actuaries because on the accident and health side, they're the ones that are actually kind of involved in the reinsurance, right? Um, so the main difference I think is on the direct side, I haven't fully understood what drives actuaries on the direct side, right? So what challenges they might be up against, and I think it has more to do with what carriers they're with, um, and sort of just that view, how that differs from reinsurance. Reinsurance, we're third parties looking in, right, and looking for insights in the way that things are moving. So I think that there are probably a lot more um, challenges on the direct side because you're probably reporting into a P&L or someone high up above who has very specific goals. May differ from your view or what you're seeing, but that's what they're seeing. So I haven't quite gotten to that, but I definitely see a difference in reinsurance actuaries versus insurance. Um, but I still love them both the same. I think they both bring so much to it. But there are definitely, I think, different challenges they have.
We appreciate that. I think that is an interesting insight that like, your concerns when you're working for a direct writer and you've got sort of P&L goals to meet, as opposed to sort of a broader, being able to take this broader, outside in view, and that kind of sort of being the thing that you're doing day in and day out is a pretty interesting insight. Question from Cord. How do you maintain motivation during challenging times at work?
That's a loaded question. Um, there's many things that you can do to keep yourself motivated, but uh, sometimes it's ignoring my emotions and just trying to get it done. Um, I find caffeine is a great motivator sometimes. And, just honestly, it's really the people that motivate me. I wouldn't be a guy carpenter for 20 years if it wasn't the people that I have around me, that have really sort of kept me here. Um, so I do find that people are the biggest motivator for myself. And if you can imagine how difficult COVID was when I was locked in this room for a really long time, when I got my energy off of people, I wasn't, all of a sudden I wasn't around them. So I had to find different ways to keep myself motivated. I've been working from home since COVID, so 6 years from this chair. Um, and I kind of had to shift how I got motivated. It can be people, it always was people. But I've actually looked inside to really keep myself grounded before I open the computer, knowing like, all right, this is what's on for the week. These are our these are our goals. I keep a very well, it's not very neat right now, but I keep a task list of anything that sort of pops in my head so I don't forget it. And I write it down and saying, oh, I want to look at this. I want to talk to this person. I want to do this. And that like whenever I get scattered or I'm challenged and, overly exhausted and have no sort of energy, self energy, I just go back to my list and say, all right, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Like I can be scattered brain, that's fine, but we have to kind of get down to brass tacks. So I use different things to keep myself motivated, but at the end of the day, it's always people.
Love that. Love that. And I think that's a lesson for all of us to take in terms of just like, conversations for the most part are free, right? Unless you're trying to talk to Oprah or Michael Jordan or something, it's easy to strike up a conversation with a person, learn something. And so we really appreciate this conversation today, Adrienne. This has been really insightful, really resonant. I think the concept of zooming out, the concept of focusing on sort of understanding the problems and the challenges of the people that you're working with are applicable regardless of the profession that you belong to. So with that, we really appreciate your time today. I will back to Parker for announcements and to take us out here.
Yeah, again, thank you guys all for being here, and thank you, Adrienne, for a wonderful conversation. We really do appreciate it. Be on the lookout in your emails, as always, for a short survey so we can continue to improve these coffee conversations. We will have one next month and the month after, and we've really filled up the full year with them. So this is going to be a very regular thing, and we hope to see you all back here. If there's no other announcements for Jeff or anything, then we can adjourn. And thank you all for being here.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Adrienne.
All right. Bye.